Hello everyone, I'm here today to do my February wrap-up, and I have read 12 books this month, 2,349 pages and 12 hours of reading. So lots of short books, also some audiobooks, but we will get through them. One thing that I was very proud of this month is that I have been consistently reading between 50 and 120 pages every day. So there was no day that I barely read, or there was no day that I just binged something, and I think that's like a healthy way of reading, so I just wanted to mention that. So I will start with the first one that I read, and that is Tomorrow, Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I read the majority of this in January actually, and I just finished it on February. And this is basically about three friends that meet in, well, two of them met when they were little in a hospital in, as you can imagine, not very good circumstances, and then they lose contact because something happened, and then later on in their lives, when they are in college, they meet again, and one of these characters' roommate is also involved in like the video game making stuff, so they start a company together, and we kind of follow them for the majority of, not the majority of their lives, but the first 30-40 years of their lives, and how kind of they evolve into their selves, basically. I really liked it. It was very well written in a way that it was very engaging and very easy to read. It was not particularly super literary or anything, but it was a very good read, and it had quite a lot of depth to it, I think, in the discussions that it was having. And I'm not into video games at all. I played some Pokemon when I was 10. I wasn't allowed to have a Game Boy then, so I just played in my friend's Game Boy. We never had video games at home. I played The Sims on the computer, and I think that's about how much I know about video games, and this is about video games. I still enjoyed it a lot. And it has, I mean, obviously the storyline is very different from Ready Player One, but I think if you like that, you probably will like this. So Ready Player One is more about a group of friends playing a video game. This is more of a group of friends making video games. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Next book I read was my first audiobook of the month, and that was Tiger Works by Ben Okri. So I have liked some of Ben Okri's books, and they're a bit of hit and miss with me, but with Ben Okri. But the ones I like, I really like, so I keep trying his stuff. And this is a new book that he has of essays and poetry and short stories, mostly about climate change and how our world is changing in general. And some of them were more interesting than others, but I think overall it just, as a book, it didn't feel cohesive. And I think also because I read it in audiobook, that hindered from the experience. I think if I would have seen it on the page, and the different formats and the different novelties that he was trying to do might have had more of an effect. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it's very well written. Ben Okri is a very good writer, but in what he was saying, I was lacking some depth, and I was lacking also some personal view on it. It was very generic climate change fiction, non-fiction kind of thing. So yeah, a little bit disappointed by that one, even though, as I said, it's very poetic and very well written, but it's just, it doesn't have as much depth as I was hoping for. The next one I read is an ebook, and that's Marzan Monamore by Katia Oskamp. And this is a very short book, and it's a very interesting book. So it's about this woman that was a writer, and she finds herself in a point in her life in which she kind of doesn't feel like she's doing anything anymore. She doesn't write, she doesn't have ideas, she's a mother, and that's kind of what she does. So at some point and her husband is sick, if I remember correctly, so at some point she decides, I'm gonna get a job as a podologist. So she does a course, and she starts going into a beauty studio to work there as a podologist. And most of the book, some parts of it also narrate kind of little bits of her life and her relationships with the people she works with. but most of it is about the different people that come to get their feet done. Most of them are old people, because those are kind of like the people that have the big calluses and stuff in their feet and that have to be treated like it's a medical necessity to go to the podologist, not just like I'm going to go and get a pedicure because I feel like it. She also has some of those clients, but the majority of them are old people, and they have kind of interesting stories and interesting views. And the book is called Marzahn, because Marzan Monamore, because Marzahn is like a neighborhood in Berlin where the salon that she works at is. And yeah, there is a lot of talk about that particular place in Berlin. I don't particularly know. I've been in Berlin before, but not in that particular place. As far as I understand, it's just a residential area. But if you are from Berlin, probably this hits a little bit harder just because of that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I found it very like warm and endearing. So yeah, it was an enjoyable read. Then I finished another ebook that was also very short, and that was When I Sing Mountains Dance by Irene Sola, which is kind of the story. It's very plotless, and the story kind of happens around the Pyrenees in Spain, and like in Catalonia, and it's very poetic, and it's a lot about like the slow life in the mountains and the cows and the the nature and stuff. It is very beautifully written, but again, I was missing like something. Like it just didn't. I don't particularly like books that are about nothing. That doesn't mean it has to have a plot, it just means it has to have like a point, and I don't think that the point of this was clear enough or relevant enough. So even though the language and everything is very poetic, and I understand why a lot of people like it, if you like poetic writing about nature, this is a great book for you. But if you want something a little bit more, then this is a little bit flat. For me at least, that was a bit flat. Yeah. The next one in my list is Soldier Sailor by Claire Killroy. I have a full review of it because I love this book and I wanted to talk and rave about it more. So this book is about a woman, and we follow her from when like she has a newborn until she's like the baby is like 3 years old or so. And she was a writer, I think, and it talks a lot about the balance of having a child and being a whole person, like becoming not necessarily a mother but just a parent, like the primary carer of a child, and still be your whole person, because when you have a child your whole life switches to take care of the child, and very often the other partner does not get that, how much work it is, how much mental load it is. And this book is like, it's the monologue of how hard it is to explain that, and how hard it is for relationships with everybody, to have that mental load of being the primary carer of another human being, basically. And how much toll it takes on people, and how lonely that journey is. So we follow her from, as I said, when the baby is a newborn, and she's having a lot of confrontations with her husband, because her husband does not really understand why she cares about these things, or if she does something wrong, he's like, oh, you should do this instead of that, and she's like, I'm drowning, I'm doing the best I can, and he never recognizes that. And at some point in the park she meets an old friend of hers, and he's the dad of 3 children, and he's also a stay-at-home dad, I think. The mother of those children is a very prestigious doctor, so she works a lot, and he kind of takes the back burner on his job and his career, and so they connect over that. And it's not really a romantic relationship, it's more of a I finally found someone that understands and can help me from a empathic point of view. And yeah, I just found it really important and really touching, and I don't think that's something that we talked about enough. Like lately there has been a lot of books about motherhood, but I think this one centers a lot more on how your relationships and you change when you have a child, and how not all those changes are always welcome. And yeah, I think that was very, at least for me, it was very impactful, and I would recommend anyone that is going to be a parent but not the primary carer of the child to read this book and try to understand. I think that was brilliant. Then the next book that I finished was Libro del desasosiego by Pessoa, and I read this and this in a vlog that I will also link down below. But yeah, this one is kind of, it's supposed to be kind of like a diary that Pessoa wrote throughout years about random thoughts he had. And I don't think it was supposed to be published. I think it was something that was possibly published, and I'm not sure he wanted this published, to be honest, because these are like very random thoughts and nothing connects to anything, and they are kind of like the kind of pretentious thoughts of someone that is very self-fulfilled. Kind of like, there was a whole page about rocks and the weight and the time of rocks, and it was just kind of like, it's trying to be deep but it's just not getting the mark. So yeah, there were a few sections that like a few pages here and there that I enjoyed, like the writing is very good and all of that, but it was very tedious to read, and I didn't care too much about it. But since we are talking about that one, I also want to talk about The Year of the Death of Ricardo Reis by Jose Saramago, because part of the reason I finished this is because I wanted to read this. And this is about Ricardo Reis, who is a man that comes back from Brazil and arrives around the 40s, I think it is, 36. And he's an old friend of Pessoa, so they meet in this book. And Ricardo Reis, I think, if I understood correctly from what I read around, was one of the pseudonyms that Pessoa used, so it's kind of like a meta thing. And in this book, so Ricardo Reis arrives back to Lisbon, and he's trying to establish himself. He's supposed to be a doctor, but he hasn't had like a practice yet, and there is this whole mystery of why is he coming back. And then he meets Pessoa, who is supposed to be dead, but they still meet, and he's fully aware that he's a ghost or something. And it's all like in 36, so it's all the turmoil of like the rise of fascism in Europe. Franco is winning stuff in Spain. There's a lot of talk about Spanish refugees that fled in 36 when the Communist Party in Spain won the elections, and that's kind of like the catalyst that started the Spanish Civil War. So that's kind of like mentioned in this book. And then there is also, of course, Salazar in Portugal itself that is rising to power, and there was also turmoil in Brazil, and kind of, is that why he left? Is that not why he left? So there is kind of all this story about all this politics happening, and then also on top of that we have like the personal life of Ricardo Reis and his love affairs and all of that. And I really enjoyed this. Sometimes I find Saramago very dense to read, because I mean, block of text, but this was quite, I found it quite easy to read, and maybe it's because I read the Pessoa just before this one, and this one had a plot, so anything would have been more easy to read than the Pessoa. But I found it quite easy to read, and I appreciated some of the things that were said in this book because I read the Pessoa, so I was glad I did that. And yeah, I really enjoyed all the politics and all the atmosphere that it creates of this time frame in Portugal. I think that there are probably many things that I missed, references that I missed because I'm not Portuguese. But I got enough that I really was able to enjoy this, so I'm glad that I like this one. The next book I read in audiobook was Things That Fell from the Sky by Selja Ahaha, and this is a book about luck mostly. So we have several characters with things happening to them. So the main character, it's a kid, and at the beginning of the book she loses her mom because a huge ice meteorite thing falls from the sky and hits her and kills her. And there is a whole scientific explanation of that's actually something that can happen because of the I think it's the exhaust of aeroplanes create like these balls of ice, and sometimes those balls of ice fall to the sky, from the sky into the earth, and normally they don't hit anybody, but in this case they do. But there is also her aunt that won the lottery twice, and that also she feels like she doesn't, her life is worse because she won twice, and then she starts writing to this man that was hit by lightning like 7 times in his life, and like basically it's about how luck affects our lives, and for the good or the bad, and how that is like, yeah, it just talks about yeah, the randomness of it, I guess. And I quite enjoyed it. I don't think it's one that is gonna stay with me super long, but it was kind of quirky, and I liked it, and it also had some deeper topics, talking about, well, obviously when the mom of this kid dies, her dad is dealing with grief, so sometimes in very unhealthy ways. So it's not the most deep, impactful book I've ever read, but it was an interesting read. It was quirky, and it dealt with some harder topics, especially like grief. Obviously, the dad of this girl has a lot of grief and deals with it in sometimes very unhealthy ways. So yeah, it's an interesting one, but maybe not one like it's going to be the most impactful one for the rest of my life or anything. The next one I read was A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid, very short book as well. And this one is about, it's an essay, like, parts of an essay of Jamaica Kincaid about colonialism in the Caribbean. She's from Antigua and Barbuda, and it talks about how colonialism has affected the governance of the place, like the corruption and all of that, and how that is a cause of colonialism, but also in terms of tourism and in other terms, and even today how people from Europe and the US, like white people mostly, still look at this kind of countries kind of condescending and in a very patronizing way, and why that is an effect of colonialism, and how that affects the countries in a deeper level. And I think it was brilliant. She's brilliant. This was very smart. I really enjoyed it. And then I read Call Me Cassandra by Marcial Gala, and this is about a boy called Raul, and he likes books, and he also likes to cross-dress. He's not completely sure if he's gay or what his sexual identity is, but he likes to cross-dress, and he likes to go to pubs and things with dress as a woman, and he has a very violent father, and his father obviously does not like that he cross-dresses, and then he has his mom is very, she's grieving her sister. Her sister died, and she's grieving her, and so she likes that Raul cross dresses and calls him or her Nancy, which is the sister's name. So she's kind of like getting her sister back by way of her son, which is very messed up as well. And he just wants to be his own person and not have to put labels on things, and he just wants to dress as a woman. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of violent and oppressive, but it's very well written. And also there is mentions of Fidel Castro and stuff, because obviously this happens in Cuba, and of people that have left Cuba and stuff like that. But yeah, overall I think it was a good book, especially with the like gender identity and sexual identity exploration. I think it was really interesting. The next one I read was The Sor of War by Bad Ninh. And this is about some people in Vietnam and how they were affected by the Vietnam War, basically. This was really badly edited. There were lots and lots of typos. There was like, yeah, a ridiculous amount of typos and things. The writing is not too bad. It's okay, but like it was really not well edited. It also doesn't have any chapters or anything. It's not super long, but it's still 200 pages, and it didn't have like any chapters or any, I don't know, it feels like it didn't have any editing. And at the beginning it said like, so this was written by Bad Ninh, and then it was translated by Phan Thanh, and then someone else went through it, and but it says English version by Frank Palmos, so apparently like it was not translated by, like, someone random translated it and the translation was not very good, and then someone that's like native English speaker took that text and actually made it like into a novel. So I don't think the writing is necessarily the writing that, like, it reflects the writing that the author had. So it was a little bit weird in that sense. Like the writing itself was not that it was bad, but it was just like, yeah, it doesn't sit well with me in that sense. But yeah, this was at the time that it was published apparently very influential, because it was the first time that we got like a Vietnamese perspective of the war, and it was in contrast with all of the American books talking about how good the Americans were in Vietnam. So in that sense, that like that's why this is an important piece of fiction, I would say. But yeah, the story was also not particularly well constructed. I think it was very scattered, and the characters were not super well developed in a way that I could connect to them. So I didn't particularly enjoy this book as a novel, but I understand the importance that it had in showing the horrors of the Vietnam War at the time when that was not that well known. The last book I read was Una Suerte Pequeña by Claudia Piñeiro, or A Little Luck, as it's translated, which I read this for my book club, and we had a discussion about the title actually, because Una Suerte Pequeña doesn't really translate to A Little Luck. It's more like a small luck. But yeah, that's another whole topic. But this is about, it's not really a mystery, but it's kind of building up to, it's like a repetitive building up to what happened at a certain point. So this is about a woman that we meet her when she's traveling from the US to Argentina. We get the idea that she's from Argentina, but she has lived in the US for a long time, because she left because something happened, and then she's coming back and kind of facing those fears and those things that happened 20 years before. And it is all connected to this school, as I understand, like a posh school in Argentina, and we don't know exactly how she's connected. We know that she's going back in principle because she works for this organization that gives certifications for schools, like bilingual schools or like international schools or whatever it is, the certification. And she works for an organization that has specific method, and so they go away around to other schools and give us our certifications that this complies to the method that we are studying. And actually, one of the girls in my book club, she works for an organization like that, so she said that that part was super accurate, which was cool to know. And yeah, so we know that she's coming back and that something happened, and we kind of built into like what happened, and there is this one person that we know is also involved into this accident or whatever happened, and so we kind of also have to figure out who that person is. And actually we find out what happened and who that person is right around like halfway through the book, and then the rest of the book is kind of like the consequences of that and how it developed, because that still doesn't fully explain why she left, so we still need like that is like bridging into why she left. And it goes into a lot of societal issues and pressures and yeah, shocks and yeah, guilt, grief, all sort of things. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think Claudia Piñeiro is a really good writer, and I want to read more from her. I think this is the only one that my library had, which is sad, but maybe next time that I'm in Spain I will get some more books from Claudia Piñeiro, because I think not a lot of them are translated to English yet, but I can read Spanish, so I can get other books by her. But yeah, I think it was really good, like the way that she built the atmosphere and the tension was really good. It never felt like shallow in the topics that she was dealing with. Some of the characters felt too good. So one of the main characters is like her former like lover, husband, not really husband, they never got married, but like her former companion, partner, who we know at the beginning that has died of cancer, and then we go back to her memories of what happened and what yeah, how she ended up where she was. We obviously meet him more, and he's just a bit too good. But other than that, I think this was very well constructed, very well written, and I read this in basically a day because I was so hooked. So yeah, I really enjoyed Claudia Piñeiro, and I think I need to get more from her back catalogue. So yeah, those are all the books that I have read this month. Let me know if you have read any of them, if you enjoyed any of them, if you have any other recommendations for me, and until next video, bye!